Hey everyone, in today's video I'll be showing you how to crochet a sun 2 different ways. So for this guy here, this is actually from the hospice I volunteer at. This is the pattern. So if you know how to read patterns, you can go ahead and just screen grab this, but if you'd like to follow along, of course I'll be going through all of the steps. So for this pattern, I am not sure who wrote it. I think it might have been Paula. She used to be the teacher at our crochet circle. There's no names on here, but credit goes to whoever wrote this. And then for my other one, so this pom-pom guy. This guy is my version of the sun. He's actually really simple to make. It's basically 2 half circles that you sew together. So this front piece I did use a lighter yellow, and then this back piece I used a darker yellow. In this video I will let you know when you need to skip ahead to create this one, because you start off the base the same way. So this part we're going to start off the same, and then you'll have to skip ahead depending on if you want to do this one or this one. So if you're interested in making one of these guys, I'll let you know what you'll need in the next couple clips. I'll be using the Red Heart Super Saver yarn in bright yellow, and then I'll also be using a lighter yellow for half of the pom-pom sun. I'll also be using a 5mm crochet hook, a stitch marker, yarn needle, and embroidery thread, 10mm safety eyes, scissors, and a pom-pom maker. This pom-pom maker is from Clover. It is the size 2.5 to 3 3/8. The last thing you'll need is some fiber fill or stuffing. To start off, for round 1, we're going to single crochet 6 times into the magic ring. So if you're doing the pom-pom method, you're going to be doing the same thing. I'll let you know when you have to skip on in the video. To create our magic ring, what I'm going to do is take my yarn and wrap it around my fingers. So I now have this X here, and then I'm just going to take my hook and insert it inside the circle. I'm grabbing this yarn through, and then now I'm going to yarn over my hook and just pull through. And then you can tighten it up, and you pull on this yarn to make the circle smaller, but don't close it all the way up. So now we're just going to single crochet 6 times into our ring. So a single crochet is going inside the circle, taking this yarn through, we yarn over our hook and pull through. So that is 1 single crochet. I need to do that 5 more times. Now to end off this circle, you just want to pull on this yarn. We're going to close it up. And then it doesn't say here, but I always slip stitch into my first stitch. The slip stitch, all you have to do is go into that first stitch you made. And then you're taking this yarn through and pulling it straight through the loop. And then I'm just going to insert my stitch marker. And this slip stitch is going to count as my stitch. So that is the 6th one. And then I'm going to put this in. And that's the end of round 1. I also want to mention that this is the only time you have to slip stitch, so every time you end the next round, you're just going to end off with whatever it says on the pattern. Round 2, we're going to single crochet into each stitch, which is basically an increase. So let's go into our first stitch and do 2 single crochets. Here is my first stitch. That's 1. And 2. So I'm going to repeat that all the way until I make it to my stitch marker, until I end up with 12 stitches total for round 2. Once you make it to your stitch marker, you can just remove it and do your last 2 single crochets into that same stitch. If you can insert your hook. Okay, there it goes. And then you can now put your stitch marker back into your last stitch, and you are done with round 2. For round 3, we're going to single crochet into the first stitch. So this one here, I'm going to do 1 single crochet. And then it says we need to do 2 single crochets into the next stitch. So here is my next stitch. We're doing 2 single crochets. That's 1 and 2. Next, you just to repeat those steps all the way through until you end up with 18 stitches total in round 3. For round 4, we're going to single crochet into the next 2 stitches, and then we're going to do 2 single crochets into the next stitch and then repeat that. So let's do our first 1 single crochet. That was in the first stitch. Now we're doing another single crochet into the next stitch. Now into this third one here, we're going to do an increase, which is 2 single crochets into this stitch. So that's 1, 2. And then you have to repeat those steps all the way through until you end up with 24 stitches in total. So remember, it's a 2 single crochets into the next 2 stitches and then an increase into the next stitch. Moving on to round 5, let's start off with a single crochet into the next 3 stitches. So here is 1 single crochet, my second, and then into my third one. Now it's telling us we need to do 2 single crochets into the next stitch, which I call just an increase. So here's that third one, or the fourth one. So there's 1, 2 into the same one. Now you have to repeat that until you end up with 30 stitches in total for round 5. Round 6, let's start off with our single crochets into the next 4 stitches. So here is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So next we're just going to increase into the next stitch here. So that's 1 single crochet and then 2 into the same one. And you have to repeat those steps all the way through until you end up with 36 stitches in total for round 6. Oh my god, a spider. For round 7 and round 8, we're just going to single crochet all the way through, so you'll still end up with 36 stitches. And because it's pretty simple, I won't show those two on camera. I will be back for round 9, and then we're going to split up if you are doing the pom-pom method. If you are doing the pom-pom sun, I will now insert a time frame of what you need to skip to in order for you to finish your sun. To begin the race section of our sun, we're going to start off with a chain of 12. I am going to skip this 1 single crochet here, but let's start off now with a chain of 12. To start off with our raise, you can remove your stitch marker because you don't really need it at this point. Well, to create a raise, we don't need it. But let's start off with the chain. So a chain is yarning over your hook and pulling through. So that's 1, 2, 3, once you have your chain of 12, we're now going to work back all the way to the base of our sun. So what you need to do is do 2 single crochets. So we're not going into this one that's closest to the hook, so don't go into that chain. You're going into this second one, and you're going to single crochet 2 times into each chain. So here is my 2 loops, yarning over and pulling through. So that's 1, and then you need to do another one into the same chain. And then you have to repeat that all the way until you get to the bottom. So here's my next chain. I'm just going to do 2 single crochets. So that's 1, again into the same 1, 2. And I'll just keep repeating that. Once you continue on with the 2 single crochets into each chain, you can see that it naturally starts to curve. So I'll just finish doing that until I reach the bottom of my sun. I said the bottom of the sun, but technically it's the top. So now once you make it back to the top of the sun, we're going to continue on with the rest of the rays. So you can see here, this is where we made the chain for our ray. So what you're going to do next is go into the next 2 stitches. So not this one, because that's where the chain was. So then you're going to do 1 single crochet here. And then you're going to do another single crochet into the next stitch over. Okay, now in this second one you just did, that second single crochet, this is where you're going to create the chain once again. So that was just yarning over and pulling through, and it is a chain of 12. Remember to go back down, you're not going into the chain closest to the hook, you're going into the second one and you're just doing your 2 single crochets into each chain until you make it back to the bottom. Once you reach back to the top portion of the sun, you're now going to do your 2 single crochets. So this is the spot where we started off with our chain, so you're not going into that, you're going into that next one. That's my 1 single crochet, and now I'm going into the next stitch over, and in the second stitch is where we always create our chain of 12. So you're just going to repeat those steps all the way until you reach 18 rays, and then I'll be back once I finish that. I'm back now with all of my rays completed, and it took me about 35 to 45 minutes, and the sun is actually out now. I started filming since like 4 in the morning, but now that we have our rays, let's go on to round 10. So for round 10, we're going to single crochet into each of the stitches in between the rays, so you'll still end up with 36 stitches total, which is what we originally left off at before we started the rays. To start our 2 single crochets, you can see this is where my last ray ended off, and this stitch right here is where the chain is for this ray. So of course you're not going into that one, you're going into the next 2. So I'm not sure if you can see that. So this one here, I'm just going to do 1 single crochet, and then I have to do 1 more, so it's this guy right here. And now we're going to go around our ray. So you don't want to go through the front because then you'll show it on the outside. You're actually going to go behind him and just push him to the side and do 2 more single crochets in between each of the rays. So let me just find my stitch. So this one here, that's 1, and then my second one. Now we come across a ray again, so I'm just going to push him to the front over my hook, and then now I'm going to do the 2 single crochets in between, and then you just want to repeat that all the way until you get back to your original stitch, and you'll have 36 stitches total in this round. I currently have 35 stitches in my round, and just make sure you count everything before you put your stitch marker back in. But because I'm at my last ray now, I have 35 stitches, so if I go around here, and since I counted, if I go into this stitch right here, it would make it 35 still. So to make it 36, I need to go into the stitch where my ray is. So I'm just going to do 1 single crochet into this guy here, and that makes it 36 stitches total. And then I'm going to take my stitch marker and place it into my last stitch, and that is the end of round 10. Rounds 11 and 12, I'll be doing that off camera because all you need to do is single crochet those entire rounds and you'll end up with 36 stitches in each of those rounds. Moving on to round 13, we're going to start our decreasing round. So first we're going to start off with a single crochet into the next 4 stitches. Okay, so here is the beginning of my row. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, and 4. So next it says we're going to, this means single crochet 2 together, but I just call it a decrease. So what you're going to do is just go into the next stitch over. You want to insert your hook and then take some yarn through. Next, you're going into the other stitch right next to it. Insert your hook, take some of this yarn through. You have 3 loops. You want to yarn over and pull through all 3, and that is a decrease. So you have to repeat those steps all the way around until you end up with 30 stitches in total for round 13. So I'll show you the decrease one more time. That's 2, 3, and 4. So I did my 4 single crochets. Now I'm going to do a decrease again. So I'm going to be working in these 2 stitches here, taking my hook through the stitch, pulling that yarn through, going into the next stitch over, pulling that yarn through. I have 3 loops, yarn over, and pull through all 3. So now I'll just continue on, finishing round 13. For round 14, it's going to be similar, but this time we're single crocheting into the next 3 stitches, and then we will decrease. So let's do that now. Here is 1 single crochet, 2, and then my 3rd one here. And now I'm going to start my decrease. yarning over and pulling through all 3. So I'll repeat those steps all the way through until I end up with 24 stitches in total for round 14. Before we close this up, we do need to insert our safety eyes and put on a mouth for our sun. So I'm just going to insert my safety eyes right now. Now I'm just taking some embroidery thread and a threading needle to put on a smile on my son. I kind of wanted to put a frowning face because I'm not really a fan of the heat, but I don't really want to do that because I'm donating this one to the hospice, so it's kind of weird if I put a frowning face on the sky. But let me put a smile, and I'm going to start from the back and just insert my needle anywhere in here where I think it looks good. And it's just basically weaving in and out. Now that we have a face on, let's begin round 15. For round 15, let's single crochet into the first 2 stitches. So here's 1 and then 2. Now we're going to decrease. So that's going into this stitch here, into the stitch after, yarning over and pulling through all 3. So you want to repeat those steps all the way through until you end up with 18 stitches in total for round 15. After you finish that round, you can now add your stuffing to your sun, and then he'll just puff up a little bit before we do our last couple decreases. Round 16, let's single crochet into the first stitch, and then we're going to decrease into the next stitches. So these 2 here. I think I have overstuffed my sun a little bit, but now I'm just going to repeat those steps all the way through until I end up with 12 stitches in total for round 16. We're now at our last decreasing round, so I did remove my stitch marker, but if you need yours to count it, you can leave it there. So for this round, we're just doing pure decreases, so you'll end up with 6 stitches in total. So we already know what a decrease is by now. We're just going to go into our first stitch, the stitch after, 3 loops, yarn over, pull through all 3. And I'm just going to repeat that until I have 6 stitches in total. I just finished my 6 decreases, so now what I'm going to do, you can see there's still a little bit of an opening. I'm just going to cut off some yarn, leaving some extra so we can weave everything in. To weave everything in, let's first just remove let's take this yarn and put it through this loop here. And that's one way to secure it at first. And then next, what I like to do is just take my hook and insert it into the next stitch over and just pull it all the way through, and continue doing that a couple more times. So here's the next stitch over, and I'm just going to pull it all the way through. And then my third one, and then at this point you can test it to see how much it'll close. So if I pull on this yarn, it's going to close up a little bit, but I think I can do a couple more. So I'm going into the stitch right after that one, and then the next one over, just pulling it straight out, and then I'll tighten it up. So that kind of closes it, and then I'm going to secure it by, let's go into any stitch closest to where this yarn is. So I'm going to go into the stitch here. I'm taking this yarn and pulling it, but I'm not going to pull it all the way through. So we see this loop here. We just want to take this yarn and insert it through. And you can do that a couple more times, and then when you're ready, you can just take the back of your hook and just take this yarn and push it through the sun. So you're just going to insert it that way. But before I actually do that, I want to go off camera and secure it a couple more times. Once you finish securing the back closure and pushing all of the yarn in, you have your very own sun. So this is the end of the first portion, and I just want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you really love your sun. In the next couple clips, you're just going to be seeing the part 2 of the pom-pom method. For the next step of our pom-pom sun, what you're going to do is cut off the yarn after you finish your last 2 rows of that single crochet. Now, once you do that, you're going to have this little loop here, and then you're just going to take your yarn and insert it into the loop so we can just secure off this one side. So now you have to repeat those steps until you end up with one more of these guys. But once you make your second one, which I already have mine here, so I have mine in a different color because I was afraid I was going to run out of this color yarn, but you're just going to do that again. But this time, when you make your second piece, do not cut off your yarn yet because we do need to sew it on together like this. Once you finish your second piece, you can now attach your safety eyes, and you can also put your embroidered mouth on. For the smile, you do need your embroidery thread and your threading needle, and then I just start from the back side and I figure out where I want it placed. And then just take it through, and then I go back in. Let me put in this one instead. And then I go back from the back again, and I just figure out where I want to start on this side. It's pretty simple. And then you want to go back into this space, into the middle. And there's a smile. So what I do next is I just turn it over and I just tie these pieces together. And now I'm going to cut off the excess piece of yarn. Thread. And then there is our attached mouth. You can make this thicker if you just keep going through and weaving it, but I just do it one time because I think that's enough for me. And now we're going to sew these 2 pieces together. I said we're sewing it together, but technically we're still crocheting it together. So what we're going to do, remember I said don't cut off this yarn yet because we need to attach these 2. So what we're going to do now is just take these 2 pieces together. And well, first let me show you. Let's go through the next stitch. So this first one here, I'm just going to go through it, and then I'm going to take my other piece and find a stitch to go through as well. And I'm going to take this yarn, pull it through, and create a single crochet. So I have my 2 loops yarning over and pulling through. So you're just doing a single crochet to bring these 2 pieces together. Now you're not going to close it all the way through because we still need to stuff it, so you need to leave some room. And then I'm just going to come back after I finish a couple single crochets, but let me show you that one more time. So I'm going through my first yellow piece, going through the back to find my second one, which is this one here. And I'm doing a single crochet. It'll be easier if you just push it like this, so you can go through both. So I'll do that one more time so you can see light yellow, dark yellow, yarning over, pulling through. So now I'm just going to finish this up until I have a small opening. I have my small opening here, so I'm just going to take my stuffing and insert it in. Also, I'm not using this yellow piece here, this darker yellow, so I'm just going to push that in as well. I added a lot of stuffing in this guy, so he's extra thick, but what I'm going to do now is just finish crocheting the single crochets all the way through, and then I'll show you how to end it off here. Once you made it back to your last stitch, go ahead and cut off some yarn, leaving extra room so you can secure this. I forgot what I was saying for a second. Okay, so we're securing it kind of the same way when you ended off this yellow, or when I ended off this color yellow. We're just going to take our yarn and put it through the loop, and that's one way we can secure it. And then we can do next, just to make sure it's extra tight, is you want to take your hook and go into a stitch. Then we're going to take this yarn through, and same thing, we have this loop, so take your yarn and insert it inside, pull it to tighten it up. Now with this yarn, you can just push it back inside the sun, so just find the stitch that's the closest. So mine would be this one here. I'm taking the back of my hook, and then I'm going to push this yarn through to make sure it goes inside. We now have the base of our sun completed, so we're going to work on our pom-poms. For our pom-poms, I am using the Clover pom-pom maker, so what I'm going to do is just take this side and pull these two up. So our little rainbow here, and then I'm going to take my yarn and I'm going to take it on this side, and I'll just hold this piece and I'm going to wrap it around a couple times. Then I just like to push it to the side a bit and continue wrapping it until it's full. Once you finish this side, just push it down. Now let's open the other side here. Here's our other rainbow, and then I take this piece and insert it into the middle. And now I'm going to start wrapping it and do the same thing. Once I finish wrapping it, I do take my scissors and cut off this middle section here, and then I push this down. And now you're just going to cut in between the middle here. After you cut the middle section, just take some yarn, make sure it's kind of long so we can wrap it around our pom-pom. So you're taking it through the middle to the other side, and then we're just going to tie it. Make sure it's tight. And then I'm going to the other side, and I'm just going to continue tying it until I feel like it's really secure. After you finish tying it, just open up the rainbow section, or a little, there we go. And then I like to pull it out this way, and there's our pom-pom. So you're going to need a couple of these so you can put it around the sun. You can also cut it off a little bit to make sure it's like a nice circle, but I have already prepped mine, so now I'll show you how I attach it. To attach our pom-pom, I'm just going to take my hook and insert it into a stitch. I'm going to take that extra piece of yarn and pull it straight through. Then I just tie it together. And I'm gonna go around the other side as well and just tie it again. Do that a couple of times until you make sure it won't fall off. I've had a couple fall off before when I was making gifts. Okay, so I feel like that's pretty secure. So now what I'm going to do is just take my scissors, and then I'll cut off about this much to match up with the pom-pom. And there's one. So now I'm just going to continue attaching it. I did make one in the other color yellow, and I'll just continue going around. Once you finish attaching all of your pom-poms, you have your own Sun. I think he looks so funny but really cute at the same time. I really prefer him over the rays because I like the extraness of the pom-poms. Also, I just got this baby clover, so I'm excited to finally use it. And I hope you guys really enjoyed this tutorial. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one.